The massive space station called Harmony's Edge floated silently in the darkness between stars. It was bigger than any city on Earth, with gleaming metal walls that reflected the light from distant suns. Inside one of its docking bays, a small, human ship had just arrived after traveling for 3 long months. Ambassador Kim Tae-ho stepped out of the airlock and took a deep breath of the recycled air. His heart was beating fast, but he tried to stay calm. Today was the day humanity would officially meet the galactic community for the first time. Everything they had worked for over the past decade led to this moment. Behind him, Dr. Park So-young carried a small tablet filled with information about human culture, history, and achievements. She had spent years preparing for this presentation, carefully selecting what would best represent their species to alien minds. Commander Lee Jun-sik walked beside them, his military uniform crisp and clean. His job was to show that humans were capable but peaceful. The 3 of them had been chosen from thousands of candidates. They represented not just their countries, but all of humanity. The weight of that responsibility felt heavy on their shoulders as they walked through the station's corridors. The walls were strange to human eyes. Some sections seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. Other areas had surfaces that looked like flowing metal, constantly shifting and changing shape. Symbols and writings in dozens of alien languages covered every available space. The air itself felt different here, charged with technologies that humans barely understood. They passed other beings in the hallways. Tall, thin creatures with many joints in their arms. Short, round beings that seemed to roll rather than walk. Some aliens wore environmental suits, while others breathed the station's atmosphere freely. A few stopped to stare at the humans with curiosity, but most simply went about their business. Finally, they reached the main council chamber. The room was enormous, with a domed ceiling that showed the stars outside. In the center sat representatives from the 3 most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. The Velthans looked like living statues made of clear crystal. Light moved through their bodies in patterns that seemed to represent their thoughts. They were known throughout the galaxy for their perfect logic and advanced mathematics. Their civilization had been exploring space for over 50,000 years. The Zephyrites were harder to understand. They appeared to be made of flowing liquid metal, constantly changing shape. But they weren't really individuals at all. Each Zephyrite was part of a massive collective mind that spanned multiple star systems. When one spoke, they all spoke together. The Korthak were the most frightening to human eyes. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with sharp features and predatory movements. Their species had evolved from hunters, and it showed in every line of their bodies. They controlled the largest military force in the galaxy. Ambassador Kim took his place at the designated human seat. The translator device in his ear crackled to life as the Velthan representative began to speak. "Welcome, representatives of the species called humans. We have observed your recent development of faster-than-light travel. Your technological progress shows promise. We are prepared to discuss your potential inclusion in our trade networks." Tae-ho had practiced this speech 100 times, but his mouth still felt dry. "Honored delegates, we are grateful for this opportunity. Humanity has much to offer the galactic community. We bring new perspectives, creative solutions, and a deep desire for peaceful cooperation." Dr. Park activated her presentation device. Holographic images filled the air above the table, showing Earth's cities, art, music, and scientific achievements. She spoke about human diversity, their ability to adapt to different environments, and their history of overcoming challenges through cooperation. The aliens listened with what seemed like polite interest. The Velthans processed the information with their crystal minds, occasionally asking technical questions. The Zephyrites remained mostly silent, their collective consciousness apparently discussing the presentation among themselves. The Korthak representative watched everything with sharp, calculating eyes. After 2 hours of formal presentations, the meeting began to wind down. Ambassador Kim felt confident that things had gone well. The aliens seemed impressed by human achievements and interested in establishing trade relationships. But then he remembered something important. Something that his advisors back on Earth had debated for months. Some had said it was too risky. too strange for alien minds to understand. Others had argued it was essential to showing who humans really were. He made his decision. "Honored delegates," Tejo said, standing up from his chair. "Before we conclude today's session, I believe our presentation would be incomplete without introducing you to humanity's most essential companions. They truly represent who we are as a species and how we approach relationships with other forms of life." The three alien representatives turned their attention back to him with renewed interest. The Veltan's crystal form brightened slightly. The Zephyrite collective hummed with curiosity. Even the intimidating Korthak leaned forward in their chair. "Fascinating," said the Veltan. "We assume you refer to your artificial intelligence systems or perhaps advanced cybernetic partners. We would be most interested to observe these technological relationships." Ambassador Kim smiled, though he wasn't sure the aliens would understand the expression. "Not exactly technological, but definitely essential to human civilization. We'll bring them tomorrow morning for a proper introduction. I think you'll find them quite remarkable." None of them could have predicted what would happen next. The next morning arrived with an unusual buzz of activity in the docking bay. Human crew members wheeled in several large containers on floating platforms, each one carefully climate-controlled and marked with biohazard symbols that made the alien security guards nervous. Strange sounds echoed from inside the boxes. Soft, whimpering, gentle chirping, and what could only be described as rhythmic purring. Ambassador Kim Tejo stood before the assembled alien delegates in the main council chamber, his hands clasped behind his back. He had barely slept the night before, wondering if what they were about to do would help or hurt humanity's chances of joining the galactic community. Dr. Park So-young stood beside him, her tablet ready to record every reaction. Commander Lee, Junsik, positioned himself near the containers, ready to help with the demonstration. The three alien representatives waited with obvious curiosity. The Velthan's crystal body pulsed with anticipation, its internal lights flickering in patterns that suggested rapid calculation. The Zephyrite collective had gathered additional consciousness nodes for this meeting, their metallic forms shifting restlessly. The Korthak warrior sat perfectly still, but her predatory eyes tracked every movement in the room. "Delegates of the Galactic Council," Dr. Park announced, activating her recording device. "We present humanity's closest allies and companions. These relationships have shaped our civilization for thousands of years." She nodded to Commander Lee, who began opening the first container. The locks disengaged with soft clicks, and the sides folded down to reveal a spacious, comfortable interior. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a golden blur shot out of the container and bounded directly toward Ambassador Kim. The dog was magnificent, a golden retriever with flowing fur and bright, intelligent eyes. His tail wagged with such enthusiasm that his entire back end wiggled. He jumped up, placing his front paws on Kim's chest, and began licking his face with obvious joy and affection. The effect on the alien delegates was immediate and profound. The Veltan representative's crystal form flickered violently, as if their internal processing systems had just encountered a fatal error. The logical patterns of light that normally flowed through their body became chaotic, random flashes that hurt to look at directly. The Zephyrite collective fell completely silent. In their entire recorded history, spanning millions of years and countless civilizations, their hive mind had never experienced a complete processing halt. But watching this scene had somehow broken their ability to categorize what they were witnessing. The Korthak warrior, bred for combat and trained to face any threat without fear, actually pushed her chair backward. Her razor-sharp claws extended involuntarily as every predatory instinct in her body screamed warnings about the creature before her. But Ambassador Kim just laughed and scratched behind the dog's ears. "This is Max," he said casually, as if introducing a longtime friend. "He's been with my family for 8 years now." Commander Lee opened the second container. A sleek black cat emerged with typical feline grace, stretching languidly before padding over to rub against Lee's legs. She purred loudly, a sound that vibrated through the chamber's acoustics in a way that made the aliens' translation devices struggle to interpret it. "Luna here is 12 years old," Lee explained, kneeling down to pet her. She's actually quite the hunter when she wants to be, but mostly she prefers sleeping in sunny spots and demanding attention. The third container revealed a colorful parrot who immediately squawked, "Hello, friends, good morning, pretty bird," in clear, understandable speech. The fourth held a small white rabbit who hopped curiously toward the alien observers, nose twitching, as she explored this new environment. Dr. Park smiled at the aliens' stunned expressions. These animals represent just a few of the species that humans have formed partnerships with over our history. Dogs like Max are descended from wolves, apex predators that chose to live alongside humans thousands of years ago. Cats like Luna were originally solitary hunters who decided our homes made comfortable territories. The Valthan finally managed to speak, though their voice came out as a strangled electronic whisper. These are classified as predatory species in our databases. Some of them, yes, Kim replied, still petting Max, who had now settled beside his chair. But they're not just predators to us. They're family members. Max here has lived in my home since he was a puppy. He sleeps on my bed, plays with my children, and would protect them with his life. Commander Lee picked up Luna, who immediately began purring louder. Cats like Luna are incredible hunters, but they choose to share their lives with us. She brings me presents sometimes, usually dead mice she's caught around the ship. It's her way of showing care. The parrot, meanwhile, had begun showing off. "I love you, good bird. Where are the treats?" he chattered, bobbing his head and fluffing his colorful feathers. The Korthic delegate found her voice, though it shook slightly. "How do you control them? What technology maintains their submission?" Ambassador Kim looked genuinely confused. "Control them? We don't control them at all. They choose to be with us just like we choose to be with them. It's not submission, it's friendship." He knelt down and called Max over. The dog immediately trotted to him, tail wagging. Max could leave any time he wanted. He could run away, find other dogs, live in the wild. But he doesn't want to. He wants to be here, with us, because we've built a relationship based on trust and affection. Dr. Park pulled up holographic images showing humans throughout history with their animal companions. Cave paintings of humans and wolves hunting together. Ancient Egyptian art showing cats worshipped as gods. Modern photos of children playing with dogs in parks. Families posing with their pets. Elderly people finding comfort in the presence of their animal friends. "This is what we wanted to show you," she explained. "Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. It's our ability to form bonds across species lines, to find friendship and loyalty not through dominance or control, but through genuine care and mutual respect." The alien delegate sat in stunned silence, watching as Luna purred in Commander Lee's arms, as Max responded eagerly to Ambassador Kim's gentle commands, as the parrot chatted happily with Dr. Park. They were witnessing something that their civilizations had never imagined possible: voluntary cooperation between species that should have been enemies. None of them realized they were looking at what would soon be considered the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy. The recording devices in the council chamber had captured everything. Within hours of the meeting's end, encrypted data packets were racing across the galaxy at faster than light speeds, carrying footage that would shake every major civilization to its core. On Valthan Prime, the crystal cities hummed with unusual activity as their greatest minds gathered to analyze the impossible scenes. Chief Analyst Zendoth played the recording for the 100th time, his crystalline form flickering with confusion and growing alarm. Around him, other Valthans processed the data through their logical frameworks, only to have their calculations collapse into error messages. "The mathematical models are failing," Zendoth announced to the emergency assembly. "According to every evolutionary principle we understand, apex predators cannot coexist peacefully with potential prey species. Yet these recordings show clear evidence of voluntary cooperation between humans and creatures our databases classify as dangerous carnivores." In the great amphitheater, thousands of crystal beings pulsed with worried light patterns. Their civilization had dominated the galaxy through pure logic and superior technology for 50 millennia. They had encountered over 2,000 different species, categorized their behaviors, and predicted their actions with mathematical precision. but humans were breaking every rule they thought they understood about life itself. Observe sequence 47.3. Zendoth continued, highlighting a section where Ambassador Kim played with Max. The canine creature exhibits protective behaviors toward the human, despite receiving no apparent material benefit. Our models cannot account for this level of cross-species loyalty without technological intervention. Meanwhile, in the networked worlds of the Zephyrite Collective, something unprecedented was happening. For the first time in their species' recorded history, their hive mind was experiencing what could only be described as confusion. Queen Node 7 broadcast emergency signals across their consciousness network, calling for additional processing power to analyze the human data. The collective had evolved beyond individual thought millions of years ago. Every Zephyrite was connected to the greater whole, sharing knowledge instantaneously across vast distances. They made decisions through pure consensus, their combined intelligence solving problems that stumped lesser civilizations. But the concept of humans and their animal companions had created cascading errors throughout their mental network. Processing error, emotional bonds with non-productive entities detected, Queen Node 7 transmitted to the collective. Unable to categorize relationships that provide no survival advantage, yet require resource expenditure, human subjects demonstrate caregiving behaviors toward creatures that contribute nothing to their technological or military advancement. Thousands of Zephyrite nodes attempted to process this information simultaneously. Their liquid metal forms rippled with distress as they tried to understand how a species could waste energy on creatures that served no apparent function. In their collective mind, every action had purpose. Every relationship provided benefit to the whole. The idea of keeping animals simply for companionship broke their fundamental understanding of intelligent behavior. But it was in the war councils of the Korthak Dominion that the footage caused the greatest alarm. War leader Gextar stood before a holographic display showing the moment when Max had approached their delegate. She replayed the scene in slow motion, analyzing every movement with predatory precision. "Military assessment begins," she announced to her gathered officers. "Observe the canine creature's approach vector. Note the human's relaxed posture despite proximity to an apex predator. The creature exhibits no fear responses, suggests complete psychological dominance by the human subjects." The war room fell silent as battle-hardened Korthak warriors watched a human child from the diplomatic staff play fetch with Max. These were beings who had conquered dozens of star systems through superior strategy and overwhelming force. They understood dominance, submission, and the careful balance of power that governed all relationships between species. Combat analysis confirms any species capable of psychological control over natural predators represents unprecedented strategic threat, Gextar continued. If humans can induce loyalty in wolves and great cats through unknown methodologies, what prevents application of same techniques to sentient species? Her tactical officers nodded grimly. The Korthak had built their empire on their ability to predict and counter enemy strategies. They had faced energy weapons, quantum bombs, and reality-warping technologies. But they had never encountered a species that seemed to weaponize affection itself. The footage spread beyond the three major powers. In the research stations of the hegemony of scales, scientists worked frantically to decode what they assumed was advanced biotechnology. Their reptilian minds, evolved from cold-blooded predators, couldn't comprehend the warm emotional bonds they were witnessing. Hypothesis: humans utilize advanced pheromone manipulation to induce submission in target species, reported their lead researcher. Recommend immediate development of countermeasures before this technology can be deployed against our population. The Trade Federation's economic analysts reached different but equally disturbing conclusions. They watched humans sharing food with their animal companions and saw the collapse of traditional resource management principles. Economic modeling suggests humans possess post-scarcity mindset regarding resource allocation, their reports concluded. Species that can afford to feed non-productive entities may possess unlimited material wealth or revolutionary production capabilities. Even minor civilizations began reacting to the spreading news. the Crystalline Confederacy started developing isolation protocols. The machine collective ran probability calculations that all ended with the same conclusion. Humans represented an unknown variable that could destabilize the entire galactic order. Trade routes slowly began shifting away from human space. Diplomatic channels that had been opening after first contact started closing again. Military fleets across the galaxy received new orders to monitor the borders of human territory. Meanwhile, aboard the human diplomatic vessel still docked at Harmony's Edge, Ambassador Kim Tae-ho was having a quiet dinner with his team. Max lay contentedly at his feet, while Luna had claimed Dr. Park's lap as her personal throne. The parrot chattered softly to Commander Lee, who was teaching it new phrases. "I keep sending follow-up messages about the cultural exchange programs we discussed," Tae-ho mentioned between bites, "but the response rate has dropped significantly. I'm starting to worry we might have misunderstood some protocol." Dr. Park scratched Luna behind the ears, earning a satisfied purr. "Maybe they need time to process everything we showed them. It was quite a lot of new information." Commander Lee offered the parrot a piece of fruit. "Could be a translation issue. Alien minds might work differently than ours." None of them realized that at that very moment, defense ministers across the galaxy were holding emergency meetings about the human threat. None of them knew that their simple act of introducing their beloved pets had been interpreted as a demonstration of the most sophisticated conquest technology ever witnessed. The galaxy was preparing for war, and humanity had no idea why. 3 months had passed since humanity's fateful introduction of their animal companions to the Galactic Council. What should have been the beginning of a beautiful friendship between species had instead become the galaxy's greatest nightmare. Fear spread like wildfire through every major civilization, transforming peaceful star systems into armed camps preparing for an unthinkable war. In the fortress world of the Korthak Dominion, Defense Minister Yoshka stood before a room filled with the galaxy's most feared warriors. These were beings who had conquered entire star systems, who had never known defeat in battle. Yet today, they gathered to discuss a threat unlike any they had ever faced. The holographic display showed the now infamous footage of Ambassador Kim playing with Max, the golden retriever wagging his tail with pure joy. To human eyes, it was a heartwarming scene of friendship. To Korthak military analysts, it was evidence of the most dangerous weapon ever created. Tactical assessment concludes that humans possess biological warfare capabilities beyond our current understanding, Yoshika announced, her predatory features grim with concern. "Observe how their so-called companions demonstrate complete psychological subjugation of apex predator species. The tactical implications cannot be ignored." The assembled War Council studied the footage with growing unease. These were predators, who understood dominance through strength, who had built their empire on the simple principle that the strong ruled the weak. But humans seemed to have turned that principle upside down, achieving control through methods that made no sense to Korthak minds. "Note the creature's behavior patterns," continued Yoshka, highlighting specific moments in the recording. "The canine responds to human vocal commands without hesitation. It shows protective instincts toward its human handler, despite receiving no apparent reward. This level of psychological conditioning suggests technology far beyond our current capabilities." War leader Thexmore, veteran of a dozen galactic conflicts, raised a clawed hand. "What countermeasures can we develop? If humans can turn natural predators into willing servants, what prevents them from using the same techniques on our own populations?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Every Korthak in the room understood the implications. Their species had evolved from pack hunters with strong hierarchical instincts. If humans could somehow manipulate those instincts, turn their natural loyalty against them, the entire Dominion could fall without a single shot being fired. Meanwhile, on the crystal worlds of Vailthan Prime, their greatest scientific minds worked around the clock to decode what they believed was humanity's secret weapon. The Research Institute's main laboratory buzzed with activity as teams of crystalline beings analyzed every frame of the companion footage. Lead researcher Kethanol stood before the high logic assembly, his crystal form pulsing with urgent light patterns. The data streams flowing through his transparent body showed the chaos that human-animal relationships had brought to their perfectly ordered understanding of the universe. The human ability to induce loyalty in naturally aggressive species suggests neural manipulation techniques that could theoretically be weaponized against any biological entity, he reported, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. Our models indicate they have somehow learned to hack the fundamental bonding mechanisms that exist in all evolved life forms. The assembly processed this information with growing alarm. Vilthan civilization was built on logic, mathematics, and predictable patterns. They had spent 50,000 years categorizing the behaviors of different species, creating perfect models that explained every aspect of biological interaction. But humans had shattered those models completely. Hypothesis formation. Humans utilize advanced pheromone manipulation combined with quantum-level neural adjustment to rewrite basic survival instincts, Kethanol continued. The implications extend beyond simple animal control. If they can alter the fundamental nature of predator-prey relationships, they potentially possess the ability to reprogram any biological entity they encounter. The crystal beings around him flickered with what could only be described as fear. In their logical minds, this made humans more dangerous than any military force they had ever encountered. Weapons could be countered, shields could be strengthened, but how do you defend against an enemy that could turn your own mind against you? In the networked consciousness of the Zephyrite collective, the analysis had reached an even more disturbing conclusion. The hive mind that spanned dozens of star systems rippled with unprecedented anxiety as Queen Node 7 broadcast her findings to the collective consciousness. Probability calculations complete, her thoughts echoed through millions of connected minds. If humans can dominate wolves and great cats through emotional bonding techniques, mathematical certainty suggests they can apply the same methodologies to sentient species. Their demonstration of friendship may represent the most sophisticated conquest strategy ever developed. The collective consciousness reeled from this revelation. Zephyrites had evolved beyond individual thought, existing as part of a greater whole. But what if humans could somehow infiltrate that connection? What if they could turn the hive mind's greatest strength into a vulnerability? Strategic assessment. Human companionship technology represents existential threat to collective consciousness. Integrity, Queen Node 7 continued. Recommend immediate implementation of mental firewalls and consciousness isolation protocols. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out in countless war rooms and research facilities. The hegemony of scales developed theories about human biotechnology that could rewrite genetic programming. The Crystal Imperium began constructing mental shields to protect against what they called empathy weapons. The Trade Federation calculated the economic implications of a species that could turn any workforce into willing slaves. Defense fleets quietly repositioned along territorial borders. Trade routes that had been opening to human space were suddenly declared off-limits due to technical difficulties. Diplomatic channels that had buzzed with activity after first contact fell silent as civilizations turned inward, fortifying themselves against the human threat. On the frontier worlds, mixed-species colonies began experiencing tensions as different alien populations eyed each other with new suspicion. If humans could somehow control the minds of other species, who could be trusted? Paranoia spread like a virus through communities that had coexisted peacefully for generations. The irony was profound and heartbreaking. Humanity had shared their greatest gift with the galaxy, the ability to form bonds of love and loyalty across species lines. They had opened their hearts and shown the universe that friendship could transcend biological differences. Instead of inspiration, they had created terror. Meanwhile, in the quiet corridors of the human diplomatic vessel still docked at Harmony's Edge, Ambassador Kim Tae-ho sat in his quarters, staring at another rejected communication request. Max lay beside his chair, sensing his human's distress and offering comfort through simple presence. Dr. Park So-young worked at her desk nearby, Luna curled in her lap, purring softly. She was documenting what she termed an unexpected cooling of diplomatic relations, trying to understand why their overtures of friendship were being met with silence. Commander Lee Jun-sik monitored the increasing military traffic near human territory, noting the buildup of alien forces with growing concern. The parrot on his shoulder chattered nervously, picking up on the tension that filled the ship. None of them understood that their simple act of love, sharing their lives with animal companions, had been interpreted as a declaration of war. The galaxy was mobilizing against humanity, and the humans remained blissfully unaware that their greatest strength had become their greatest curse. The countdown to catastrophe had begun, and nobody knew how to stop it. The morning of March 15th started like any other aboard the Earth Defense Station orbiting Luna. Admiral Park Min-ho sipped his coffee while reviewing the daily patrol reports, watching the peaceful blue marble of Earth rotate slowly below. The coffee was still warm in his hands when Lieutenant Kim So-ra burst into the command center, her face pale with shock. "Admiral, you need to see this immediately," she said, her voice barely steady. "Long-range sensors are picking up massive fleet movements, multiple species, all converging on our system." Min-ho set down his coffee cup and moved to the main display screen. What he saw there made his blood run cold. Hundreds of red dots were approaching from 12 different directions, each cluster representing a major galactic civilization. Korthak battle cruisers, Velthan crystal ships, Zephyrite collective vessels, and fleets from civilizations humanity had barely made contact with. "How many ships total?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. Lieutenant Kim's fingers flew over her console. "Conservative estimate, nearly 3,000 vessels, sir. They'll reach Earth's outer system in 6 hours." The Admiral's mind raced through the possibilities. Humanity's entire space fleet consisted of barely 300 ships, most of them exploratory vessels hastily converted for defense. They had never expected to face a military threat of this magnitude. The human colonies were scattered, defenseless, with no time to evacuate or prepare. "Send emergency broadcast to all human vessels," Min-ho ordered. "Full mobilization. Every ship that can fight needs to get here now." He paused, knowing it wouldn't be enough. "And begin civilian evacuations immediately. Prioritize the children and elderly." As klaxons wailed throughout the solar system, families across Earth and the colonies began the heartbreaking process of fleeing their homes. But this wasn't a normal evacuation. Families refused to leave without their beloved companions. Children clutched their pet rabbits while parents carried cat carriers and dog leashes. The evacuation ships quickly filled beyond capacity as people insisted on bringing the animals that were as much family as any human relative. On Mars colony, 8-year-old Lee Jin-woo cried as his parents tried to explain why they had to leave his dog Buddy behind due to space limitations. "But Buddy's my best friend," the boy sobbed. "He'll be scared without me." His father, Choi Hyun-woo, made a decision that would haunt him forever. He gave up his own seat on the evacuation ship so Buddy could come with his son. Similar scenes played out across the solar system. Elderly woman Park Yoon-ji refused to board a rescue ship without her 20-year-old cat, Mr. Whiskers, who had been her companion since her husband died. A young couple on Europa Station chose to stay behind rather than abandon their disabled rescue dog who couldn't handle the stress of space travel. The approaching alien fleets monitored these evacuation efforts with growing confusion. Their intercepted communications were filled not with military preparations or strategic discussions, but with desperate attempts to save what they had assumed were biological weapons. Families were dying rather than abandoned creatures the aliens believed were instruments of conquest. Admiral Min-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship as the human defense fleet formed up between Earth and the approaching armada. 300 ships against 3,000. The mathematics were simple and brutal. They couldn't win this fight, but they could buy time for more evacuations. "All ships, this is Admiral Park," he broadcast to his small fleet. "We're not fighting for territory or resources today. We're fighting for the right to love who we choose, to care for those who depend on us, and to show the galaxy that there's more to strength than firepower." The first alien ships entered weapons range at 14:30 Earth Standard Time. The battle that followed was brief and devastating. Human ships, designed for exploration rather than warfare, exploded under concentrated alien fire. The massive orbital defense platforms around Earth held for 37 minutes before being overwhelmed by the sheer number of enemy vessels. Captain Yoon Sang-ho of the destroyer Friendship managed to ram his ship into a Korthak dreadnought, taking both vessels out in a brilliant explosion that lit up the space around Mars. His final transmission was simple. Tell my daughter I love her, and give Max a treat for me. As Earth's defenses crumbled, the alien fleets pushed deeper into the system. They expected to find hidden military installations, secret weapons facilities, or advanced research stations developing the mind control technology they feared. Instead, they found animal shelters, veterinary hospitals, and dog parks. The diplomatic vessel carrying Ambassador Kim Tae-ho had taken heavy damage in the initial assault. Its hull was breached in multiple places, life support was failing, and the artificial gravity had cut out hours ago. Tae-ho floated in the command center, holding Max close to his chest as the golden retriever whimpered in fear. Dr. Park So-young was unconscious, blood floating in small spheres around her head from where debris had struck her. Luna, her cat, pressed against her unconscious owner's body, purring softly as if trying to provide comfort. Commander Lee Jun-sik had died when the bridge was hit, but his parrot Rico still perched on his shoulder, occasionally saying, "Good morning, Commander," in a voice that would never receive an answer. With shaking fingers, Ambassador Kim activated the ship's communication system for what he knew would be the last time. His message went out on all frequencies, reaching every alien vessel in the attacking fleet. "To the peoples of the galaxy," he began, his voice weak from oxygen deprivation, but filled with desperate sincerity. "I am Ambassador Kim Tae-ho of humanity, and I'm speaking to you in what may be our final moments. We don't understand why you've turned against us. We came to you in peace, with open hearts and genuine friendship." Max whimpered and licked his face, the dog somehow understanding that something was terribly wrong. Kim held him tighter, drawing strength from the simple act of comforting another living being. "We only wanted to share what our companions taught us," he continued, looking down at Max's trusting brown eyes. "That different species can choose to love each other instead of fighting. That loyalty doesn't require conquest, only kindness. That the strongest bonds aren't built through domination, but through mutual care and respect." In the command centers of the attacking fleets, alien commanders listened to this transmission with growing unease. They had expected defiant military broadcasts, threats of retaliation, or pleas for mercy. Instead, they heard a dying man holding his pet and talking about love. "Look around your ships," Kim's voice continued, growing weaker. "Look at the recordings your crews are taking of this battle. You'll see human families who chose to die rather than abandon the animals you call weapons. You'll see children sharing their last breaths with creatures you think we control through technology." The ambassador's breathing became labored as the ship's atmosphere continued to leak into space. Max pressed closer, offering what comfort he could to the human who had cared for him since he was a puppy. "We never had mind control technology," Kim whispered into the communication device. "We never had biological weapons or neural manipulation devices. We just had love. Simple, honest love for creatures who chose to share their lives with us. And in return, you've destroyed us for the crime of showing affection." The transmission cut to static as the diplomatic vessel's power systems finally failed. In the silence that followed, alien commanders across the fleet began to realize the magnitude of their mistake. They had come prepared for war against a dangerous enemy, only to discover they had just committed genocide against a species whose only crime was being too loving for the galaxy to understand. The battle was over. Humanity had fallen. But in their final moments, they had taught the galaxy a lesson that would haunt every surviving civilization for generations to come. Love, it turned out, was indeed the most powerful force in the universe. It just wasn't the weapon anyone had expected it to be.